Hi, everyone. I'm Pastor Chuck, and this is Theology in 10. Thanks for joining me here today on another episode of Theology in 10, the 10-minute Bible study in which I answer your questions about the Bible, theology, Christianity, and church history. I am an ordained minister in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, and I am pleased to have you join me again today. Our question for today is about communion. And so I will read a question, and this is actually from, everyone remains anonymous here, but this was from a parishioner of mine, not just a parishioner out there in the ether, but of one of my parishioners, and they sent me an email asking this great question. Hi, Pastor. I have a question about communion. I recently brought my, I'm not going to say who specifically, but this was a young person. We'll say it's a granddaughter. I recently brought my granddaughter to church during communion, and I had her come forward with me, and I was hoping that you could do a blessing. However, you were providing communion to some children her age, and this was a bit confusing for me. Can you explain why you and some ELCA churches commune young children? Thank you. Well, first, that's a great and important question. So thank you for asking, and thank you for asking me that question as I am your pastor. As many people have probably noticed over the last couple of decades, more and more Lutheran churches, along with other mainline churches like Episcopalians and some others, are beginning to offer communion to very young children, even infants in some cases. Now, I realize that many Lutherans were taught that a person must have what shall we say, a certain amount of knowledge or wisdom or understanding to receive communion. And so people who have children now were taught that. And so when they see young children now being communed, they're a little confused because their child isn't old enough to have had a first communion class or to really, quote unquote, understand what communion is all about. So why are we now communing young people? Well, a little bit of history here. Lutheranism, over the last few decades, actually, has been reevaluating this idea of only communing young people, or not communing young people, on the simple fact that the argument is, well, my child doesn't understand what communion is. And so the question then is, well, as an adult, do you understand what communion is? Can you explain how bread and wine become the body and blood of Jesus Christ? Do you really understand it? And see, the answer, of course, is no, because Lutherans don't attempt to explain how that works. Some churches do, other churches don't. We don't explain how it becomes the body and blood. It's a mystery, and we accept that mystery, and that's it. So if, as an adult, we can't really understand, then perhaps understanding isn't a requirement to receive communion. And if it isn't a requirement, what other reason would we not commune a child? After all, as Lutherans, we do baptize children. They don't understand what's happening. Communion is a gift. In the historic Christian view, it is the ultimate gift. It is Jesus Christ, and we cannot do anything to earn Jesus Christ. So is it appropriate to withhold this gift from a child? Again, I certainly realize this is not how most Midwestern Lutherans, anyway, have been taught for the last 150 years. And so this is a very new thing for a lot of people. But the church is much older than 150 years. The church is 2,000 years old, not the Lutheran church, but the Christian church. And the earliest Christians always communed children. We literally have their writings telling us this. And so we have that as a historic precedent. And we also have that a huge portion of the Christian world, particularly in the Eastern Mediterranean world, never stopped communing children. The idea that, or the history of withholding communion from children began in Western Europe during the Middle Ages. And Lutheranism sort of adopted that mindset. And now we are beginning to re-examine that medieval practice, and have been doing so for quite a few decades now, actually. But we're Lutherans, right? So does Martin Luther have anything to say about this topic? Well, he actually did. Martin Luther himself, he did not see the need to commune children. His exact words, if I recall, were, "They don't need it." But he was also firmly aware that the early church, the original practice of the church all around the world, was to commune even infants. And so Martin Luther didn't forbid either practice. He was okay with doing one or the other. He was okay with communing children, even infants. He was okay with families saying, I don't know if I want to do that. So classes about communion, of course, do come at an appropriate age, whether a child receives or not. We can call that first communion class. We can call it something else. And that is appropriate to teach young children at a certain age, as they get older, what communion is. But it's also appropriate to teach adults what communion is. Like, there isn't a limit to when, well, I just now know communion and what it is. Again, we can't really ever fully understand it, but we can all keep learning. And if communion is a gift, well, we give gifts to children all the time, and they may not understand what the gift even means, but we still give them the gift. So, as a pastor, what do? Well, I encourage children to receive. I encourage parents to allow their children to receive, because it is the ultimate gift. But I am also aware that this is not something that everyone really understands yet. And I always want to defer in this case to whatever the family wants to maintain as their family custom. Though I would encourage you to reconsider what your custom is, simply because communion is a gift, and we can't earn a gift, and we can't understand what this gift is. We can't understand its power. But Jesus promises us that there is power in this gift of communion. But ultimately, whatever you want to do is fine with me. You want your child to wait until they have a first communion class and can have a grasp of sort of what's happening, that's fine. If you want your children to commune at a very young age, that's fine too. Martin Luther said both were acceptable practices, and I'm going to kind of go with what Martin Luther said in this case. Not every case, but in this case, I'm going to go with Martin Luther, because I think it's good pastoral care. Thank you for your question. This is such a great question, and I hope it answers your question. If you like this content, please do like and subscribe to the channel right here down below. And I hope this kind of gives you a little idea of why we do what we do. And again, if you have any further questions, please email me or respond in the chat below. Or if you're in the area where I am, come to me face to face and we can have a further discussion about it. But it's a great question. It's a great topic. And I thank you for asking it. See you again soon with another question. And until then, bye everyone.